Okay, so hello, my name is Tali Palma. I'm from the Observatorio Astronómico de Córdoba, Argentina. So in this talk, I'll focus on the new discoveries of the global cluster candidates in the VVV data. My main collaborations are here, the ones I listed, sorry, here, the one I listed here, particularly Dante Miniti is the PI of the VVV survey. No. No. Okay, so the VISTA variables in the Via Láctea, also known as the VVV, is an infrared variability survey of the Milky Way bulge and an adjacent section of the disk. So this survey, at the time when it started, it was one of the 6 new infrared ESO public surveys. The observations were carried out with the VISTA 4.1 meter telescope at the Cerro Paranal Observatory. The VIRCAM camera on the telescope is a 16 detector array, and that samples 1.65 square degrees. So the observations have been conducted since early 2010 up to 2016, and more than 1,900 hours were allocated for the project, covering an area of 562 square degrees and in 5 broadband filters. So here you can see this map made by Roberto Saito and Marian Hempel of the limited magnitude that the VVV reach in different regions. So in the most external regions of the bulge as well as disk, the photometry reach up to 17.5 or 18 magnitudes in the KS band, which is really, really deep, because if you compare with the 2-mass survey, the VVV reach 3-4 magnitudes deeper. So it's quite impressive in that sense. So a total of 348 tiles or fields were observed, covering 1 billion point sources across an area of, as I said, of 562 square degrees. The tiles are aligned along the galactic longitude and latitude, as you can see here. So all the VVV data are already publicly available at this site and the archive.eso.org. So after the VVV has finished in 2016, the extension of this survey has started, called the VVVX. It is still observing until 2021, tripling the areal coverage, as you can see here, and complementing the variability studies done by the VVV survey. So also it extends the VVV time baseline, which enables the proper motion to be better measurements in the future, and in the regions, in optically obscured regions where Gaia is limited because of the high extinction. So in total, VVV has been mapping this inner region of the Milky Way since 2010, which is more than 10 years now already. So this image is the same one as I put in my first slide, just to see how the region this is projected on the sky. So this visualizes better why it's really complicated to study this region. As you can see, because of the central region here of the bulge has a lot of gas and dust clouds that are located in the plane of the galaxy and obscure all the optical images that can be, that the optical instrumental that try to observe there. So these are some of the discoveries made with the VVV. In this talk, as I said, I will focus on the globular clusters particularly. So why the globular cluster? Why are you so anxious with those objects? So they were always very intriguing objects, since these populations are among the oldest stars in the galaxy with ages greater than 10 to the 10 years. They are astrophysically also very important for many, many reasons. These are some of the reasons. For example, they play a crucial role in constraining the stellar evolutionary models and the galactic chemical evolution. They're important in studies of galactic structure, formation of the Milky Way. They act as a distance scale, dynamical probes, and more and more and more. And particularly, these objects are relatively rare since they represent less than 0.1% of the stars in the Milky Way. So that means that each new discovery is a treasure and is very important. So identification of new globular cluster, even the low luminosity ones, can improve our knowledge of the galactic globular cluster population significantly, since it evidences the incompleteness of the actual known cluster. So while most of the globular cluster discoveries have been made in the galactic halo, another obvious place to look for was the galactic bulge that hosts both metal-rich and metal-poor globular clusters. So the Milky Way bulge, originally was identified as a distinct galactic component, has traditionally been very challenging to observe. The photometric studies toward low extinction windows have suggested that the region to be essentially old with little room for intermediate age stars. What was contrast in the to the findings of Bensby, which based on spectroscopy, indicated that a fraction of at least 15% of the metal-rich dwarf star should be younger than 5 gigayears. That is more metal-rich than minus 0.5 dex. So a broad metallicity range between minus 1.5 and plus 0.5 dex has been confirmed with a metallicity distribution function, turning out to be dependent on the field location. So all of these studies suggested that there is a coexistence of different bulge populations. So this is the extinction contour maps of Schlafly and Finkenbeiner from 2011. So back in 2010, where VVV was just started, there were only 36 known globular clusters in the VVV field, and their location is known here, is shown in, you see here in the blue circles. So these are here in the images, they are the real images for those 36 globular clusters from the VVV survey. So as you can see, some of them are very prominent and bright, but others are fairly invisible, and that's because they're located in this complicated region with really high reddening, extinction. Hello?
Hello, yeah. I think some technical issue. So
yeah, if something happens, so I'll share it again. I don't know what happened.
Yeah, maybe this Zoom server error, maybe it might be a Zoom server error. So it's restarted for us. Yeah.
Okay. So now you can see it?
Yes.
Yes, okay. And maybe I can, no, the video is still doesn't working. Okay, sorry. So we continue.
No problem, continue.
Okay, sorry. Okay, so I don't know where I stopped. Oh, okay, here we see. So, okay. So why do we look for new globular clusters? I mean, why should there be more any more, why do we believe that there are more globular clusters? So when we compare the Milky Way with other galaxies like M31, the LMC, or the Sagittarius dwarf galaxy, we realize that the Milky Way bulge has very few globular clusters. The number of non-globular clusters in the bulge is too small for its mass. As you see, it's 2 times 10 to the 10 solar masses. So where are the missing ones? Either the census of Milky Way bulge cluster is very incomplete, or the Milky Way bulge is very efficient cluster crusher or destroyer. So, or both, we don't know still. So these uncertainties arise other questions, such as these, like where are the missing ones? And so how can we distinguish the disrupted clusters in that dense region? So all these questions motivate us to monitor the bulge with much more detail using the near-infrared observations and to search for new indirect methods to find the possible missing clusters. That is other than the visual inspection or automatic detection algorithms use until now. So, for example, to understand why do we need to go to the near-infrared bands, so this is a globular cluster called UKS1. It was the first globular cluster discovered with a UK Schmidt plate a few decades ago. So if you look at these images, the optical images which are on the left, you don't see the cluster basically. And if you go to the, so if we go to the near infrared in the middle, or far infrared, which is in the right, we start to see it more clearly. So when we looked nearby, the first globular cluster that was discovered in the VVV survey was located just 8 arc-minutes away, that is about 25 parsecs in the projected distance. So, and it was this called VVV cluster 01. It's much fainter, more distance, which means that it's much harder to find it. So these images show, on one hand, that the necessity to search for the near-infrared wavelengths for possible hidden cluster in the dense and extincted bulge. And on the other hand, to expect to find the low luminosity clusters, maybe some disrupted, and with morphology and characteristic a bit different than the classical globular clusters that we knew up to now. So when we think, where are those missing clusters, we think about the inner region. The center of the most inner region is hidden, here we can say, is hidden by the gas and the dust. And in the galactic plane, in the galactic center. So this is an expanded region of this, and it's about 6 degrees per 8 degrees. And as you can see, up to 2010, only a few globular clusters were found there in this region, and the red ones, the red circles, are the metal rich globular clusters, while the blue one are the metal poor. And in the background, you see the extinction map from Schlegel. So there are no clusters in the very extincted regions of the galactic plane, in the most center. But if we look the orbits of all the globular clusters, including the ones that are all over the halo, at some point, some of them come really close to the galactic center. So from this, several intriguing questions arise now, again, and more questions. So which from the globular cluster were formed within the Milky Way bulge, and which belong to the bulge now, or just passing by now? And maybe some of these were accreted, or a result of merging of 2 or more clusters. So these are works, some of that I compiled just to see how much these works had discussed some of these issues, and it's still in study because the more we research, the more question we found. So what happened to the globular cluster in bulge? So they are what we know is that they are a globular cluster, which maintain their structure, but while others have been destroyed. So this image here is the simulation made by Carlber of the globular cluster system in the Milky Way. So they basically simulated about 10,000 clusters and just let them evolve. So most of them were destroyed, but some of them remained, and they were concentrated in the central regions. So deep in the potential well, toward the galactic center, there are dynamically processes that are responsible for destroying them. These are just a list of some of those. And so it is reasonable to think that the bulge is the place where most of the disrupted galactic globular clusters would end up. And that is why we search there. So for the last decade, new surveys and searches have produced a large number of new candidates. In fact, there are more than 150 new globular cluster candidates in the Milky Way bulge today, and many of those were discovered by the VV survey. So when we explore now the globular cluster candidates within the 2.5 degrees from the galactic center, that is the 360 parsec projected distance from the galactic center, as we had before, we can see many dozens of new globular cluster now, the candidate discoveries, although not all of them have been studied in detail and been confirmed. But we do find now a lot where there was nothing up to 2010. So, as I said before, we need to monitor the bulge in more detail and to use indirect method to since the visual inspection in this region is quite limited. So by meaning of indirect method, that is using stellar tracers, which are useful for disentangling the stellar content and find hidden clusters, such as the pulsating variable stars, such as the Ara Lyra, the type 2 Cepheids, the Mira stars, and the red clamp giants. So what we did, in fact, was we searched for overdensities of characteristic sizes of the order of a few parsecs. Those ones would be the candidates for globular clusters. So in this figure, this is a map showing the red giant distribution in the bulge region. The overdensity found here mark the possible new globular cluster candidates location hidden among this sea, the ocean of field stars. So in this way, we have found 22 new globular cluster candidates in 2017. We did selection cuts in the Wesenheit column magnitude diagram in order to create maps of bulge red giants. So the Wesenheit magnitude is used to minimize the reddening, and the cut in color here is to eliminate the foreground less reddened stars of the disk, which are bluer than the red giant branch of the bulge. And no cut is done for the more reddened objects, since we didn't want to lose the possible to find the very reddened candidates. So this table shows here the parameters obtained for the sample, and this was the first sample of new candidates for globular cluster, mini 01 till up to mini 22. So these are some of the column magnitude diagram that we obtain using the VVV-PSF photometry for 2 arc-minute radius and applying statistical decontamination procedure. So the CMDs in green are the observed, all the stars observed in that radius, and the black is a comparison field, while the blue one is the CMD that was obtained after the statistical decontamination. So we can see some nice candidates, while others have a lot of dispersion. So this same method was we used for searching for stars, searching for star overdensities, but applying for the Ara Lyra stars based on the Ogle 4 catalog. So the Ara Lyra, we know that they are old metal poor population that are frequently found in the globular clusters. So in general, these are more compact groups than the red clamps, the red giants, sorry, of 2 or more Ara Lyra stars. Those ones that we search for, from 2, 3, 4 or more, a compact group of Ara Lyra stars. So in this survey, in this way, in this study, sorry, in that way, we found 38 more candidates, mini 23 till mini 60. And in some of them, we also have some type 2 Cepheids inside a 2 arc-minute radius. So the search was later expanded to include a wider area of the bulge sampled by the VVV, and which contains regions beyond the Ogle 4 campaign. So the new sample analyzed the RRB obtained from the work of Majest in 2018, who identified almost 4,200 Ara Lyra in the galactic bulge by matching the KS photometry with the template by the chi-square minimization automatic classification. So at the end, we found 24 new candidates from Mini 61 till Mini 84. And more recently, last year precisely, we extended more the search and added a couple of additional steps to target more distant objects. So we first used the match catalog of VVV and Gaia made by cameras and discarded the nearby sources with distances that are less than 3 kiloparsecs, as well as the sources with proper motions which were consistent with the mean motion of the galactic disk. And then we built the regime density maps to search for the new candidates. And finally, we checked the optical and near-infrared color magnitude diagrams for each individual object, selecting the ones with the regime branches tighter than their surrounding fields. So while in the most targets, a clear red clamp is present, in a few cases, there is also a concentration of Ara-Lyra stars or blue horizontal branch stars that can be observed. So the table shows here 50 new candidates. And that is our final sample till Mini 135. So after finding these new globular cluster candidates, so the first thing we have to do is to confirm their physical reality. So how do we decide if it's real or if it's just a background fluctuation, like an infrared window in the line of sight? So in an article published in 2018, we confirmed the physical reality of Mini 22. We gave some tips of the few techniques that can be used. And basically these are to use the color magnitude diagrams and luminosity function in the near infrared or the optical or both to detect the typical globular cluster characteristics such as the regime branch, the turnoff, the horizontal branch, the red clamps, and the contaminated diagrams because of the severe background and the contamination of the foreground and the background. So afterwards, made isochrome fittings, use the kinematics, that is the proper motion from Gaia or the VVV, measure the radial velocities, and this measurement can be used as a second method also as for the color magnitude diagram, the contamination. Also use stellar tracers like the Ara-Lyra, type 2 Cepheids, or also the detailed chemical abundances. So all these techniques can be used as to try to confirm the physical nature of a candidate. So let's see some of the results we obtained in this analysis. So Mini 22 was the candidate from the first search using the Wesenheit magnitude cuts. It has shown to be concentrated cluster with a core of about 2 arc-minute. It's the contaminated color magnitude diagram shown, clearly a red clamp and a regime branch, and we reach even the turnoff here. So the distance was measured from the red clamp as well as using 3 Ara-Lyra here, 1, 2, and 3, that were found in this field, sharing the same distance and found to be members of the cluster. So the near-infrared and optical CMD indicated a metal-poor galactic globular cluster, and the best fit with the theoretical stellar isochrones yielded an age of approximately 11 giga-years and a metallicity of minus 1.3 dex. So we conclude that Mini 22 is possibly a genuine bulge globular clusters, and a further radial velocities analysis is needed in order to firmly confirm its nature. This object is another example of globular cluster we have discovered, but using the Ara-Lyra tracers. In this work, in 2016, we searched for Ara-Lyra type AP in the galactic disk. And we have found hundreds of Ara-Lyra and some of groups which had overdensities. So when exploring the distance distribution, since Ara-Lyra are distance indicators, we found some of the peaks in the distributions. So exploring the larger peak is how we found this cluster. So the group considered here is one of the larger overdensity outside the bulge. It's about a dozen of Ara-Lyra stars tightly packed in a small region and about half a dozen located above the 8 kiloparsecs. So when we looked at the image, the globular cluster here was really clearly seen on the top of this ocean of stars. So the density map here of the globular cluster surrounding has shown a clear maximum here at this location in pixels, and the cluster significance shown here is more than 100 above the background. So it was clearly detected. So these are the VVV-PSF color magnitude diagrams for a 3 arc-minute area. Here the position of the red clamp is marked at 13.3, more or less 13.35, I think, magnitudes. And the left panel here is the observed color magnitude diagram with the location of the RL Lyra, and this is a comparison field and the decontaminated diagram. So we can see that here, some stars, those stars that were left, are from the main sequence of the galactic disk, and that here shown here, this is the main sequence of the galactic disk, and these are that remain as a foreground stars after the contamination. So in the work of Contreras, in 2018, the authors studied the orbital parameters of these globular clusters. They did a follow-up spectroscopy, and first, so the proper motion were measured from the VVV, and here in the plot, you can see this, the vector point diagram of the proper motions, and as you can see, it is very well separated from the disk stars. To the bottom, this part of the bottom right of the diagram. From spectroscopic follow-up, the radial velocity were obtained, and so having the proper motions and the radial velocities, the orbits could be calculated, and they show that this is a globular cluster that remains in the disk. It doesn't go very far from the galactic plane, and in fact is elongated also. And so this could be the result maybe of dynamical friction and disk shock. So I'll go quickly. I think I don't have much time. So in a work done in last year, we selected so we selected 22 candidates from the MINIS list. This was the second work, the second detection with the RL Lyra over densities. So from Mini 23 to Mini 44. And we analyzed their physical reality. So we studied their color magnitude diagrams and the luminosity function using the VVV dataset database, as well as the Gaia DR2 proper motions. And the color magnitude were properly decontaminated by the two methods, that is by the statistical and by the selection in the proper motion diagrams. So we also searched for the RL Lyra and the Myra variables in the field of these new globular clusters. So these are some of the color magnitude diagrams that we obtained with the statistical decontamination. So on the left are the comparison fields, while on the right are the observed and the decontaminated one in blue. And we also observed and analyzed in the same way the globular clusters 6642 and 6637 as to measure the distance and branding of our candidates. So from these, at the end, from the 22, we only I wouldn't say confirm, but I would say that they have good chance to be possible candidates, while we discarded 5 from the final list. So these are, on the other hand, so these are the CMDs obtained on using the proper motion selection and this, on the second decontamination method. So we use the data of Kamers and Saito, and we search for over densities in the proper motion plane and obtain for those the corresponding color magnitude diagrams. The Kamers, what they combine the Gaia with the VVV-DR2 data and the VVV-PSF data. So the data that the catalog they obtained had to appear in all these catalogs. So finally, as I mentioned, we searched for the stellar tracers, the RL-Lyra and the Mira stars from Google. And these figures show the distance measured using the individual RL-Lyra in black and the Mira in light blue circles in the field of the globular cluster candidates. So on average, assuming that they are all field stars, the RL-Lyra distances appear to be systematically shorter than the Mira distance. And this is because the brightest Miras, which has magnitudes less than 11 magnitudes, are saturated in the VVV photometry. So this was the bias in the selection of the photometric data. So at the end, taking into account the deep color magnitude diagrams and the luminosity function analysis and the possible association of the variable stars, we find that 17 out of the 22 new candidates may be real and should therefore be followed up, while 5 candidates were discarded from the original sample. So another exciting discovery very recently is the globular cluster Garo 01 found in the VVVX data, which is the new data just obtained. So on one of the scientific goals of the VVVX survey is the search and the physical characterization of the galactic globular cluster, which already yields some results. There are some, in a couple of the years, we have some work from Borisova and Barba, and a lot of new stuff currently is now in preparation.
Yeah, Professor, so you yes? have 2 minutes time.
Okay, yeah. I finished. So this global cluster was confirmed in this work as a low luminosity and distant new global cluster, deeply embedded in the Milky Way disk. And it was also discovered as it has an overdensity of regiant stars, and it lies in really complex low latitude region with variable extinction, high stellar density. And in the optical data set, we also found this in Gaia, so it was clearly observed. Okay, so these are some of the color-mantic diagrams obtained from the proper motion decontaminations. So we'll continue. And finally, which is now in preparation, we have Mini 23. It's a candidate from one of the mini list. This candidate was one of the best of the sample of the 22 we analyzed last year. So we added 2-mass photometry as to better define the cluster center and the upper Regine branch, including the Regine branch tip and slope, because these stars in the VVV database appear to be saturators. So these CMDs show a more complete diagram from 7.5 till almost 17.5 magnitudes in the KS band, and we combined the VVV with 2-mass and Gaia DR2. So we have here this radial radial density profile and the proper motions, and we also did some spectroscopic follow-up. So now we have also the VLT data from the VLT Muse to obtain the radial velocities, chemical abundances, and we also draw its orbital parameters, obtain everything. So hopefully it will be published soon, and just stay tuned. And I leave you with the conclusion. Thank you.